welcome everyone to today's session on from legacy to leading edge. This is going to be a very stimulating and interesting conversation. And I'm your host, Krishna Chaitanya Swarna. I'm also called Casey. Some of you who might have seen, webinars from Upshot, you must have seen me there. So this is my first time doing a webinar for XCube, which is where I work here as a digital transformation consultant. And our expert on the call today is Rama Krishna Sreepada. We call him RK. I think we have lots of acronyms in our company. I'm called Casey. He's called RK. So welcome, RK.
Hi.
Welcome to the conversation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Casey.
for our audience, could you give an introduction of yourself, and then we'll jump right into the topic.
Sure. I've been with this company since its inception. Kind of a founding member, co-founder. Majorly deal with technical aspects of the company, the technical works of the company, and I also manage and lead Upshot, our product, which is a customer engagement platform here at the company, basically. Yeah.
RK, you would have to speak a little louder.
Louder? Okay. Am I too feeble? Yeah. No, is it better now?
Yeah, it's better. Perfect. I can hear a small echo there, but that's fine.
Sure.
All right. Okay. So let's get started then on the topic, which is about transitioning from monolithic architectures to microservices-based architectures. So first, RK, I think I would like you to define these two terms, because that will set a common page for everybody, and we can then start discussing further. So could you define microservices, first monolith and then microservices?
Sure, definitely. So basically, monolith literally means one large rock, right? In literal sense in English. But in the software world, if you have to define it, it's basically a system made up of modules, software modules that are tightly coupled with each other, and hence giving you a impression that this is a single unit and one large system delivering lots of services.
Right.
And whereas for microservices, as the name itself suggests, it's a small service providing basically a small and specialized functionality. You can take many of these microservices and build the system that you want to build with the functionality that you want to deliver. And all this coming together is one system. Basically, all the microservices coming together with one system. Basically, both of these things, monolith and microservices, are architectural styles or patterns, basically. Not just, I mean, when we can't say that this is a software module or a framework, but it's a pattern or style of building your applications in software.
Right. And is there some is it like the monolith is it like the older pattern? Is that really
right? So out of these two patterns, monoliths, I mean, we are all well averse with monolith patterns, but microservices is a more recent, younger design pattern or software systems design pattern, right? And this is because of various advancements in technology, various aspirations for the businesses, whatever things, new things being invented, right, every day. So yeah, monolith is more older one. Yeah.
Got it. So can you help compare these two styles? For example, pick a few dimensions and then compare these two patterns or styles of architecture.
Sure. I think if you have to compare these patterns, you can compare based on how they are deployed or how they are designed, and the kinds of resources that you allocate for these services, whether it is monolith or microservices, and the kind of software that you use to build these systems. If we have to talk about deployment, monoliths are usually built and packaged as a single unit, right? And they're deployed all together. I mean, all modules are deployed together, tightly coupled. Even though they're tightly coupled and other stuff, a monolith uh, architecture can contain multiple processes running together to provide the services, but are usually deployed on usually, not always, usually deployed on a single host, wherein all these processes are sharing the resources of the host that they're that the service is deployed on. Whereas when it comes to microservices, it can again technically be all of them can be technically deployed on a single host, but they're usually deployed on multiple hosts with varied definitions of resources. For example, CPU or RAM or network restrictions, etc. I mean, the values that the kinds of resources that you provide to each of these services can vary. Whereas in a monolith, all of them are contending for the same services, for the same resources.
Got it. Got it. And what about so if I let's say go to the code base of a monolithic system versus I go to the code base of a microservices based system, would I expect to see anything different in terms of technology, like what kind of stack? Can you touch on that, Ake?
Yeah, sure. Monoliths, like again, like the word mentions, right? Single. Usually, it is a single tech. Rarely more than one or two. So your entire set of modules or the things that you're packaging together as a single unit are all built in one program, one major framework or one major style of um, tools and frameworks and other stuff. Whereas in microservices, each of those services can use a different language. Each of those services can use different set of frameworks. Each of the services can be using various frameworks and security and other stuff, right? So many aspects of microservices can use many services in tech basically and tools.
Got it. So you're basically you're saying that there could be a larger variety of technologies that you can see in a microservices based deployment.
Right.
Okay. So can we start off with some examples, like give us some popular examples of companies that are using or could be using
So
microservices?
I think all new age tech companies are using microservices. It's not just tech companies. I think all companies are using. If they have any software play, they are using microservices. But most popular examples that come to our mind, as always, are Netflix or Amazon or Uber or YouTube or these companies like TikTok and social media and these kinds of platforms, e-commerce platforms, right? So, for example, if we talk about Netflix or Amazon, um, the kinds of functionality that they provide you, um, even though they are in a single UI, in a single page, in a single screen, they're all coming from different microservices. They're all
Oh,
packaged together onto your screen in a single, in a single screen via multiple backend services, which are coordinated to get you that experience.
got it, got it. So even let's say when I'm booking an Uber cab,
Right.
or when I'm driving using Google Maps, so most probably I'm using some kind of microservices in the
Correct.
background,
They're
right?
all, yeah. Each of those apps is actually consuming multiple microservices. For example, you mentioned Uber, right? So the service is using a service to maybe fetch all the nearby drivers. Another
Right.
service is maybe mapping out your travel path and finding out the best path to go in, etc.
It's
Or maybe
almost
some other microservices fixing the pricing for you.
uh,
Maybe defining if you have to, if it has to charge you more,
so maybe
right?
there is a microservice for surge pricing.
Surge pricing, yeah.
Got it, got it. So it sounds more like they're like a teamwork, right? It's like a team of
Correct, correct.
microservices together, giving the experience.
Giving you the experience, correct. You will not see that on the UI, and as an end user, you will not feel that there are multiple services on the back end, which are being carefully orchestrated to provide you the experience. But behind the scenes, there can be hundreds, in fact, sometimes.
Nice, nice. So it need not be very apparent to the end user that in fact many times there is no way to make out, right? But it's
Correct.
all the magic is in the back end.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So see, I've been hearing about microservices since the last 7 or 8 years so much. Also, sometimes when I go and attend some tech seminars and events like that, there also, inevitably this topic always makes an appearance. So, what is the reason that there is so much talk about microservices over the last few years? And it's increasing even more actually as time goes by, right?
Right. I think before we, talk about why there is so much discussion about microservices and other stuff, I think we should understand. I mean, you mentioned this already because monolith is an older framework or older style of doing things versus microservices is the newer one. So, why did the software industry even invent a new one, right? Why did they have to create a new pattern first of all? Because there are a few aspirations of the businesses that a monolith is currently finding it hard to deliver on, right? What are
Okay.
those aspirations that a business could have? Usually business aspirations are financial or UX kind of aspirations, right? How do you retain your users? How do you make them loyal? How do you increase your revenue? How do you cut down your costs, etc.
Right. Right.
Whereas there could be other factor, which is other aspirations which are based on security. Is Are you providing a secure service? Do your customers believe in your security practices and other stuff? There could be technical aspirations, like if you want to add new capabilities into your system or to your platform, let's say AI, ML, ChatGPT, or anything else for that matter, right? Does your current monolith, platform or the tech that you are using support, adding those features? If not, then your aspirations are unmet basically. So that's where, I mean, basically your need to invent a new pattern or whatever comes from those unmet aspirations from whatever other pattern that you might be using, and hence the push or the greater um, times that you keep hearing about microservices. Everywhere you go, you hear microservices because of this. Somebody else, some company, for example, we mentioned Netflix and Uber, right? They're doing much better than any other app that have come before them.
Right.
Again, it need not be because of microservices only, but microservices help you deliver whatever your goal was.
Right. So they're instrumental in achieving certain objectives as a company.
Right. Right.
Got it. Got it. And and you're also saying that these aspirations, it's pretty challenging for a monolithic system to meet. Uh, I'm sure there could be some monolithic systems that might be, giving pretty robust support.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
so. What
Go
you're
ahead,
saying
Casey.
is it's just get it. You're saying that it just gets harder and harder for monoliths to sort of keep up in the race against, let's say, microservices type of maybe like a competitor who's using a microservices or
Yes, kind of. It doesn't mean that monoliths are going to be obsolete or whatever, right? Or you should not use monolith. Basically, like I said, whatever is the functionality, whatever is the goal that you want to meet, whatever is the aspiration that your business has, right? Meeting them with microservices is easier or at least faster to get things done than in a monolith, basically.
Got it. Got it. So if a company is, wondering, should they or shouldn't they try out microservices, or let's say, make a shift to a microservices based architecture, what would your answer be to such a question? Like, should I look at it? Should I consider it? Or, I don't probably need to consider anything like this. So if I'm in a dilemma, how would I resolve it?
Right. Um, I think it's not a should I or should I not kind of a question. I think it's basically a when and how kind of a question. It's inevitable, the move to microservices. Um,
Oh,
the
okay.
decision to migrating, the decision to migration of your monolith to microservices or transition is on the cards for everybody basically. It's just the time and basically the compulsion to do this uh, or the priorities for the business basically. The time to, in the sense, when I say time, uh, is it the right time for you to move from monolith to microservices?
Mhm.
And it is now the right time to do that, to take advantage of all the various things that are happening in the tech world, from cloud computing to everything that enable adoption of microservices. And
Okay.
the reason I'm saying this is not because monoliths are bad.
Hmm.
Uh, they are good. They are, I mean, maybe right for some circumstances, but a massively scalable, millions of users on board kind of systems are served better uh, through microservices and scaled better to microservices than on monolith kind of architectures.
Probably
And
we should
let's talk
also.
about, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I think we
Yes,
should also break this question into. I'm just. It's occurring to me that maybe we should look at both the. What do you get if you move to microservices type of a consideration, as well as if I choose not to go, then am I losing out on something?
right. Um, what do you get by migrating to or transitioning to microservices? Basically, like I mentioned, if you are million users daily actives or monthly actives, and or you have a large user base to accommodate on a day-to-day basis, scaling basically this factor is scaling. Agility in terms of being able to release your features faster, functionality faster, or upgrading your tech systems faster,
Hmm.
or
Right.
resilience, or automating things and better monitoring of your services, and maybe reduction in cost of your operations in some cases. In some cases, increasing the revenue you make, basically the number of dollars you make for every dollar you put in to create these microservices, the return on investment, right? So how do you get all this stuff? I mean, there is ways to get this, but yeah, those are, I mean, what are the advantages that you get becoming tech polyglot or whatever? And what do you lose out? Basically, I think because all the new age companies or all the new age products are adopting microservices from day one. Your competitors can be adopting microservices, scaling faster, building out features faster, and delivering better user experiences faster for their customers. And hence, you might be losing your customers to them. That is one thing that we can talk of if you have to say what we lose if we don't adopt microservices.
So you're saying that it can kind of lead to a weaker position in the market, especially if there are aggressive competitors who are capitalizing on microservices and basically innovating faster, or just trying to steal your users.
Yeah.
Right.
Very small incremental things also help, either in retention or loyalty or whatever, right? So experimenting faster and releasing things faster is easier in, microservices than in monoliths.
I think you're touching upon a very important topic there, RK, which is about experimentation, because I think one of the mantras of modern tech companies is massive experimentation.
Right.
Running potentially hundreds of experiments, in a week or a month, and
Correct.
scaling into thousands by the time you see the year through, right?
Right.
And you learn so much in all those iterations.
Right.
So it involves a very different release picture, right? Release management is
Correct.
sounding very different in this case, uh, compared to the good old days when you would see those release notes coming out once in 3 months, or what was that, quarterly updates.
What are these cycles and other stuff? Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a pretty far cry now. uh,
Yeah.
so in the new world of experimentation, do you also feel that microservices could be a critical game changing
Yeah.
factor
Yeah.
there?
Microservices are critical actually. They are the only way. I mean, like you yourself mentioned, monoliths, quarterly release or half yearly release or annual release cycle and other stuff, right? So you're not experiencing customer reactions faster. You've taken a decision. You've planned things out. You took a year to release things out, and then when it's released, what if it doesn't work? Will you spend another year doing things, right?
So I think it's also the whole opportunity window and the speed of learning, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Those are, I mean, yeah,
Quick
it's quite
reaction to feedback, user feedback, basically. How do you
user
do that?
feedback. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's quite. It might seem like a terrifying prospect to a company that today's times, if they can't react fast enough to the changing landscapes, right?
Right.
So if we take an example, suppose a company has some monolithic systems. They've already invested money in them. They've built them out. Let's say, maybe for the sake of bringing out more angles to this topic, imagine case where a company has two monolithic systems. One of them is a simpler kind of a system, which is useful although not critical.
Okay.
And the second system is, let's say, it's fairly complex, medium to high complexity, plus it gets used a lot more by the business. So we could think of it as lying on the critical path.
Okay.
In other words, if something happens to that, there is business impact, right?
Okay.
So if a company has, and then I'm taking this example because there are companies that have several systems, right? They run
Right.
several systems. It's a fairly common thing. So now that we have kind of settled on the answer of it's only a matter of time before you begin to, or before you are compelled to consider microservices, uh, which one would they choose to transform first from monolithic to microservices?
I think they should choose to, migrate the complex or medium to complex kind of monolith that you mentioned, which is on the critical part. Um, the reason being, I mean, again, I'm taking it from your definition of the first service, which is simplistic versus non-critical thing, right? So when you said simplistic, I'm assuming it has a defined boundary of functionality that it's providing already, which is very close to the definition of a microservice already, right? Just
Mm.
the maybe the deployment methodology is different, but it's already providing a simplistic or defined functionality with a boundary of what it can
The
do
scope
and
is
what it can do on the
smaller.
scope it what can do, correct? Whereas the complex one is already doing a lot of things and it's also on the critical part for you. And you maybe want to, lean on the microservices thing to, deliver value faster for you, basically.
Okay. So complexity and criticality sounds like a good combination to start
Yeah,
looking at.
basically make your life easy, right? Break down all the complexities in your life.
Look at wherever there is this combination of complexity and criticality is probably a good place to consider examining further. Uh,
Yeah.
and does it also change the whole idea of using microservices or their application? Does it change when you are a B2C company versus when you are, let's say, a B2B company? How does this play out differently in these two cases?
Um, it does play out differently because your thought process is different. When you're doing B2B, you're interacting with other businesses. Whereas in B2C, you have a predefined set of contracts. In the sense, when I say contracts, whether it is APIs or how do you interact, how do they interact with you and other stuff. You have defined them, you have made them public, you maybe iterate on them frequently, but they're consuming those set of services. But when it is B2B, you're interacting with either your partners or vendors or other businesses that you rely on and other stuff, right? And the contracts with them, or how do you do business with them, or how do you communicate with them, how do you exchange data with them is completely different, right? And a business in one region could be using one methodology versus in some other region using some other methodology. There, what's happening is instead of building or writing code which is working on conditional, which is a conditional coding, right? If you write an if business is B, if business is C, what do you do?
If
Instead of
construct,
that,
yeah.
if yeah. So instead of doing that, if you create a microservice, that manage the communication with your business, with the other business talking to, and that acts as a layer of service between your core business and the communication layer, basically. So you're building all the customizations, you're moving out all the specificities of talking to a secondary business into
Yeah.
another microservice of its own. So your thought process of communicating with the B2B or the microservices architecture thought process is different for B2B versus B2C. That's it.
Right. So then it also kind of, it sounds like it's also a good place to talk about third-party integrations, because in B2B scenarios or even in B2C scenarios, if you are leveraging, for example, the ready-made services of another company, you
Yeah,
partner with them and you just want to leverage, instead of building, you're basically buying, right?
correct,
Uh,
correct.
So what's the play there, right? You're buying something, so can you also
Hmm.
put that into a microservice type of a style?
Yeah,
Because
I
somebody
think
else is offering some software, let's say some bunch of APIs or something.
we should look at these two in the same B2B angle, because when you say third party integrations, you're still integrating and not the customer integrating directly with those third parties, right? So it is it's again similar to B2B. Let's take for example how you mentioned third party integration. Let's say if you want to do email, there could be 10 vendors that you rely on. Why do you rely on those 10 vendors? Maybe somebody has better functionality, maybe somebody has better sending rate, maybe somebody has better email templates to use, whatever, right? You integrate with multiple vendors and their integration mechanisms are different. So you build your systems, and again, another thing could be resilience or just the success rate of those
Right.
third party vendors, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean every integration with every of each of your third party, provider can be a microservice of its own.
Right.
Whereas your own core system is interacting with a aggregator kind of microservice that you build for yourself,
Got it. So
which can
it almost
define
sounds like there
the
are
path.
several layers in the, like a layered system, right?
Right.
Nice.
So microservices helps you build those many layers. I mean, the number of the layering is unlimited. Basically, you can go whatever you can, right? Imagination. Yeah.
Right. Uh, Also, one thought strikes me. Okay, so if you, let's say, as part of, maybe you're a B2C company. Okay, let's, for argument's sake, let's think you're a B2C company who is serving a certain kind of user base, and as part of your microservices development, let's say you hit upon some really nice microservices that you built them yourself, basically, to serve your user base. So does it also open up some innovation and new line of business models, for example, where you could go and sell part of your microservices to other companies who might be requiring something
Yeah,
like
absolutely. See, that's the advantage of going microservices first, right? Because your own system, which are built as microservices, is now letting you look out for new areas of avenues for revenue, right? What if it were in monolith could have been just some feature in your application is now also making independently for you because it's being sold or packaged as a microservice which has some specific defined functionality that the world is looking for basically.
that? Of course,
For
that
example, we talked about the email thing earlier, right? Email
uh-huh.
is a simple functionality, right? Sendgrid and other companies, you know, have made that a company of its own, sending emails, managing send rates and other stuff, right? If you had built it for yourself, it would have been simple, module within your system somewhere in a monolith.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a very impactful point because it can even start a new line of business if planned properly and if but that it also makes this point valid, RK, that when you are exposing a microservice as a business offering to some other people, then how do you deal with things like scalability and meeting the demand in terms of, suppose suddenly, like, there are so many people who want to use your service or leverage your service, and there is no predictability. For example, when do they want to use more of it versus when do they want to use less of it?
Right.
Because if you open up a line of business, you have all these things to worry about.
Correct, correct. So I think, now we're all aware of cloud computing and we're using, clouds like Amazon or Google Cloud or Azure or things like that, right? And they all provide you with auto scaling and, load balancing. All this that is needed to, quickly spin up and spin down servers to serve your traffic. But even before the cloud thing came up, the tech was there, right? Either through Dockerization, containerization, Docker Swarms, and Kubernetes and all this stuff. Even if you had, even if you did not have the server infra scaling capabilities, you're already scaling them as containers. You're spinning them up and spinning them down based on your requirements. How many containers do I need? How many at 7:30 in the morning or 8:30 in the morning, etc. You can
Right.
schedule them, launch them on demand, or based on schedule, or based on the metrics. So you're already doing that through containers and stuff. But the cloud thing has made it easy to scale up the infra also, right?
Mhm.
Earlier, we used to buy racks of rack spaces in data centers. Now we are not buying rack spaces in data centers. We're only buying infrastructure. Let's say, for example, AWS it is these instances, and you're deploying your containers on them,
Hmm.
basically ready to scale for whatever load you want.
Right,
Sky
right.
is the limit, kind of thing. Yeah. Again, there is a rate at which you can scale. You can't say, give me 20,000, instances right now, kind of thing, cooling off and all that stuff, right? So various other things that come into play. But yeah, scaling is much faster now because infra is not your own. You don't have to provision them, pre-provision them, keep paying them even though you don't use them, whatever, right? So quickly shut down, quickly scale up, and all that stuff.
So what are these? So it's a fascinating point, right? It sounds like cloud computing then is very much like a pretty big factor in this whole topic
Right.
of microservices. So,
Yes, today it is big factor. Yeah.
so from your experience, like what kind of things excited you, when you worked on microservices and in a scenario of cloud computing? What kind of things did you
Mm,
notice? What kind of things excited you with their possibilities and with their power?
right. We, I mean, from my experience, I've used, Docker containers, Docker from, clusters and other stuff. and I've also used cloud ECS or EKS or any other cloud, mechanisms to, basically deploy container systems and all that stuff, right? So, but basically managing my own Docker Swarm versus using ECS or EKS is not such a big, game changer or whatever. But the new age stuff, I mean, which is not very new age now, but let's say lambdas and Azure functions and other stuff, which are what I should call them. What should I call them? I think we should call them nano services or much smaller than that, right? Because microservices, if I say today a microservice is a set of business requirements, serving a set of business requirements with a tight boundary, right? But with lambdas and other stuff, each API of your existing service can be its own microservice.
So it's just a more granular way of doing the same
much more granular, yeah. And without you having to provision or maintain anything else, right?
Interesting, yeah. Then that's a pretty big thing. So cloud computing is like almost like a very, very closely related thing in this whole topic.
Right, right. Cloud computing has made it easier. We talked about experimentation earlier, a few minutes back, right?
Yeah.
Cloud computing has made it much more easier for us to experiment with what we want to do. Let's say if I had to implement a new feature and it required a new database or a new instances with lots of RAM and CPU power, etc., etc.
Right.
If I had to go buy that thing into my rack in a traditional data center, I'm investing lots of money just to test a feature, right? I don't even know if it will succeed. But right now with cloud computing, you don't have to invest anything upfront. You have a feature built, ready to deploy it immediately, test it for a few days. If it doesn't work, shut it down. You're only paying for those few days that you've tested it for.
Right.
So rapid testing, rapid experimentation, and all the stuff is being enabled with the cloud computing, basically. Easy for tech companies to do much more experimentation. Yeah.
Right. This also, we've covered a few important things. We've touched upon cloud and its role. We've also touched upon the whole idea of, taking some of the microservices and in a B2B scenario, right, and turning them into lines of business on their own. So these things kind of almost point towards SaaS, right?
Correct.
Which is personally, it's a favorite topic of mine.
Okay.
Partly because maybe both you and I, we work in SaaS. So can you tell us more about SaaS as well as about what we do and how we use microservices there?
Yeah, sure. SaaS again. I think the foundation for any SaaS product or SaaS company is always microservices. Monolith is just not in their picture at all. At least that's what I want to believe, right? So microservices from day one, because what you're trying to do with SaaS is basically bundle a lot of things into one product at different price points, at different functionality levels, for different domains or businesses or users. So you have extreme leverage on how you want to sell your services and what do you want to sell, where and when and how. And hence there, I think they're planned and built as SaaS services from day one. For example, a SaaS service which is also doing business in US, APAC, or India, or Europe, or whatever, has also to deal with lots of regulations, right? It is GDPR or any other kind of data protection regulations, or if it is just regular governmental regulations, local regulations, user aspirations. India may like red color for everything, but the US may like blue color for everything.
Right.
It is cultural to emotional to governmental regulations to everything, right? So all of this are very well suited for the SaaS thing. SaaS is where they shine, actually, where you can do it faster.
Right. So Upshot, uh, tell us about Upshot and tell us about
Yeah,
the use of
Upshot. Yeah,
microservices. What have you done
yeah.
with microservices in Upshot?
So Upshot is basically, like I said earlier, right, a consumer engagement platform, right, a customer engagement platform. So basically, what we are doing there is providing a set of tools for our clients to engage with their customers. So basically, if I am, let's say, Uber, I want to connect with my customer who is the rider or the driver. How do I interact with them? How do I get feedback from them? How do I, gamify their experiences, increase their experiences? Just connect with them, engage with them by, improving their understanding of what the platform is and what it can deliver for them, right? So
Hmm.
you have various things to do with them or connect with them or talk to them and other stuff, right? So we provide those tools, and each of those tools is a microservice because today you might want to do a survey, tomorrow you want to do a rating request, tomorrow you just want to give a tutorial on how to use some new feature that you implemented,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? Or just let's say you implemented a new payment mechanism in some country where credit cards are not there, for example.
Right.
Just give an example. Yeah. And how do people use them, right? When there is no credit card, how do you pay for some service? When Uber was introduced originally, I was very fascinated with the concept that you can get into Uber and when you reach the destination, just get out without having to pay. But there is a bill in your system, right? You're paying later. That's it. You're not paying right now and then to the driver when you reach the destination.
Hmm.
So that that's a different thing that maybe customer would need to know when and how will I do this or when will I pay this, right? So maybe there is a small tutorial somewhere, and these can be embedded at runtime anytime that you feel like, right? So these don't have to be embedded into your application. They can come at at random times whenever you choose to display them. So all of these are microservices where you do a survey, rating, help, tutorials, or in-app messages, or push notifications for that matter, or email. All of these are microservices. Right? Yeah.
Okay. And let's also talk about this idea of back end versus front end,
Hmm.
because I get a feeling that a lot of what you have said, I'm able to place it in the back end part of the whole system. Like,
Right.
can somebody use microservices on the front end also?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so how are you delivering your experience? We talked about Uber. We talked about Netflix and Amazon, right? What is the front end? So, for example, in Netflix, if you are doing recommendations, if you want to display recommended movies, there is a microservice running at the backend, which is actually crunching what should be recommended to you. But the piece of UI on the front end is can also be deployed as a microservice now with JavaScript frameworks. Each of your page, each of your functional part of your web application or a web property can also now be a microservice through services or frameworks like multi SPA and other stuff.
What is multi SPA?
Multi SPA. Basically, SPA is a single page architecture. So basically, what you see is one single page, right, on the UI in front of you. When you click on a button, it doesn't look like the browser URL is changing, right? It doesn't. It is not refreshing. Your content on screen is changing, and
Hmm.
each of that is delivered dynamically to you. So that kind of architectures where you, let's say, today you think React is better, tomorrow Angular becomes better. You want to shift to Angular, let's say. You don't have to shift to Angular en masse. You can change one page to Angular or one page to React or one page to some other new framework that you want to. tomorrow later on if it becomes more popular and more powerful.
Right. Yeah, that's something I've learned right now that you can use it for even front end also, which means that you are now so much more flexible when it comes to uh, innovating on the user experience also.
Correct. Again, tying back to experimentation. User
Correct.
experience
Yeah.
is continuously finding out what works better for you or for the company or for the user.
Right. 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 Also, one of the things, let's shift gears to security, because that is also a very sort of a critical topic these days.
Right.
With increasing news of hacks and outages and all kinds of security incidents. We know, all of us know what kind of a PR disaster it can be if something like that happens,
Correct.
right? So,
Right.
what can microservices provide to, let's say, the chief security officer or information security officer of a company? What kind of security related benefits can microservices deliver?
Okay.
Like, clearly
Um,
better than a monolith.
right. Okay. So, for example, let's take a simple use case. Let's talk about very simple use cases instead of hacks and other stuff. So let's say you simply have to upgrade from Python 3.5 to 3.10, or if you have to migrate from Java 7 to Java 8 or whatever, right? These are simple use cases. You're simply changing the framework for languages that you want to use to build your services.
Mm-hmm.
If it is a monolith, you'll have to upgrade all your code. Every single line and file of your application has to be changed to the new tech or framework.
Right.
Whereas in microservices, you're taking a piecemeal approach, right? Your microservices are already small in size. You
Mm-hmm.
can pick and choose which one to attack first, which one to migrate first to newer frameworks or newer technologies, right? Similarly, when it comes to security also, because a particular functionality has a vulnerability,
Right.
your monolith as a package is vulnerable in full versus a microservice which is using that package, one or more of those microservices which are using that package are only vulnerable here. So your total radius of vulnerability, the overall coverage of these vulnerabilities is much smaller in microservices, specialized or focused in areas where these vulnerable parts of code or parts of frameworks are used, versus in a monolith where the entire application is vulnerable in total. So
That's a great point. Yeah.
for a chief security officer, it is um, it's a good thing that his total attack vector, I mean total attack surface is smaller.
Right. In the sense that what part of the whole system somebody can target.
Can't target, yeah.
Got it. Got it. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very trivial benefit. Seems like a big benefit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And because you're already microservices, right? Like we mentioned about agility here. If let's say only one of your microservices affected with this vulnerability, you have a specialized team, a specialized service. Just make those changes, whatever those changes are, and release the service immediately. You don't have to wait for the entire monolith to be retested again because you made a small change or you made a small patch. For example, an OS patch. How does
Hmm.
the monolith behave versus how does this microservice behave? Is easy to verify and release quicker, right?
Okay. So let's also talk about some of the challenges. You know, suppose I mean, so far we've touched upon all the undoubtedly beneficial aspects of moving to microservices. I think that's pretty good motivation to decide in favor of moving. What could be some things that somebody has to bear in mind before they get too excited and just want to jump? Uh,
I think there can be many actually, but I think when you talk about microservices, the first major thing that you should identify is, you know, the communication interfaces between these services. Earlier, if you are on monoliths, they are tightly coupled. Anything that you change, you know what is going to change, and hence there is, clear clarity on clarity in the entire team of what's happening, right? But in microservices, if a microservice is built by a set of four people, another microservice by another set of four people, and if they don't communicate with each other, and if they you know use the same data layer or same databases to communicate and save data or retrieve data from administrator. And if one of those teams modifies the data structure or database schema, or if the communication interface between service 1 and service 2, if it was earlier using JSON and we want to migrate it to XML or whatever, right, or a customer protocol, then or even within JSON, if you have just changed one field name, you
Right.
capitalize something, let's say the service is broken, it doesn't work anymore, right? So the communication interface is primary. Then the team sizes. What is your team size? What do they specialize in? What tech capabilities do they have? Are they ready for the distributed computing issues which come with distributed computing? Can you debug faster? Are you ready for debugging at that scale and fixing problems? And what are the operational costs? You're now doing more microservices, right? It was only earlier one, now it is 100, let's say. Your operational overhead is more. Are they ready for that? And what kind of automation can you put in place? How do you do alerts and monitoring? All this stuff are things that you want to, think about before, you jump onto this.
So it sounds like,
Yes.
I mean, it's an attractive proposition, but at the same time, it also sounds like it has to be done carefully. It has to be done with lots of planning and foresight,
Correct. Yes,
and no
lots of
small amount
planning
of.
and yeah, well thought out structure.
And
Yeah,
also, I think the collaboration and the whole, human to human
human to human
communication,
interactions. Correct,
collaboration
communication.
also could be like an issue which has to be like totally in control and managed well.
Correct.
Perfect. So let's talk about this topic of suppose somebody makes up their mind. Okay, we think that we are we are positive that we want to shift towards microservices. What could be what could that process look like? So just paint a picture for what that process could look like, and then after you answer that, we will pick some questions from the audience.
Sure. When you say the process, I think there is no one framework or one methodology that I should specifically say this is the right thing to do or this is the way to do it, because it's majorly a an exercise in itself, right? You have to go into lots of analysis, a consulting kind of exercise, or some kind of internal discussions and a forum to identify, um, you know, um, or bring in multiple departments of the business, whether it is from finance or from technology or from customer support or from user experience, whatever it is, right? Bring them in, understand what their concerns are, what their pain points are they happy with the existing monolith? Do they really want to think of migrating to microservices? What are the pains that are they're experiencing here in monolith right now, which they want fixed, and maybe they can be fixed in microservices. So the team has to sit together, deep down, dive deep into all these issues. Basically, a working backwards approach, so that they can analyze and decide on what their ultimate approach should be on how to do this. Basically, they'll have to, from these meetings, derive all the KPIs. that the business wants to move,
Right.
and then based on those, identify what modules to transition first to microservices.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So at this point of time, we'll take a look at some of the questions. So one question is from Archita. It's about how accurate has been the ROI estimates post transition. I think we'll come to give us a few minutes. We'll be covering the ROI aspect. And the second question is, what's the ideal tech stack that developers should be proficient in for handling effective transitions? That's a good question.
Yeah. When I mean, there's again, like I said, it's always a choice, right? There's no ideal tech stack. There's no one tech stack that we should
I think we should
point it on.
probably modify
But I
that
think
question
it's a
as
process of
popular.
popular. Okay. Yeah. So if you ask me, then I will say go cloud. Use lambdas and Azure functions and other stuff. Use all the tools and tech that they provide. For example, um, even before we go that, use GraphQL as an API layer in front of your services for their communication layer, or use managed services and other stuff, right? So it more than tech stack, I think it is your understanding of how these components interact and what can help you deliver faster value, whether it is event-driven architectures or queues or whatever, right? So there are multiple things that come into play when you say microservices. How do they communicate and all this stuff, right? So those stacks is what I'm talking about. So how do you debug? How do you monitor? How do find find an issue? If there is an issue, how do you find what the root cause is faster? Because there are multiple services involved. Which services? I mean, why did this API or why did this functionality break? Which service is causing this issue? Is it because it is underperforming, or is it because it is completely down, or is it because something else? Which
Right.
layer of this, things is going down and other stuff, under stress, etc. So these are the stats that you have to, be better at than saying, let's say you have to be good in Java or in Python or whatever. When we talk about those.
Yeah, that's a reasonably good answer.
Basically,
Although
the new engineering practices. Yeah.
right. I think the person who put in the question might have been expecting a cookie cutter list, but I'm afraid you'll have to settle for RK's answer. Okay, RK, let's touch upon. Let's continue the thing about, we'll wrap it up in the coming few minutes. So we'll touch upon this process that you said. We'll do this working backwards kind of a consulting exercise.
Right.
It almost sounds like that's typically what someone like me does in the digital transformation. In the beginning
Correct.
of transformation exercises, we do it. So it sounds like this is a topic that plays right into that kind of exercise, right?
Right. So basically, when you say digital transformation, I I I don't want to get into the definition, but what you're ultimately doing is creating a roadmap for how your future should look like, right? How do
Yeah, and
you
also the KPI
make
you mentioned.
KPI aspects? Yeah, how your future should look, and what KPIs do you want to move, and how do you move them, and what should you do to move them, basically, right? So yeah, this fits into that. I mean, the working backwards approach is basically that. Basically, even if it is microservices, forget about the business transformation itself. Just from monolith to microservices is also the same thing. You have to go through this exercise, go through this
Right.
rigor, identify what those metrics are that you want to, monitor, or KPIs that you want to move, or
Right.
businesses or departments that need to see value out of this
Hmm.
investment. Yeah.
Right. Imagine that exercise is complete, let's say, for a fictional firm, right?
Hmm.
You've identified what kind of KPIs need to be improved, and also, some kind of a list of modules or list of functionalities that are very closely connected with those KPIs, right?
Right.
So then the next thing is, towards planning the whole implementation, one possible question could be, do we swallow it whole? Do we do like this whole Big Bang approach, or do we take a more gradual or phase-wise manner? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, if you ask me personally, I would suggest phased approach, but it doesn't mean that swallowing it whole is bad. It's just that that decision of a Big Bang approach should be um, driven by definitive arguments and compulsions. For
Right.
example, if there was a security scare, if there is a vulnerability in your packages that you're using, and there is no way out except for a Big Bang, then that's a good candidate for a Big Bang, right? For example, I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's the only thing, but there should have been some kind of compulsion that has driven you to take that decision for a Big Bang approach. I'm not saying that should not be done, but
Right.
if things permit, do a phased approach. Identify the targets that you want to migrate first or transition first. Again, how do you identify these things? How do you identify the modules that you want to migrate first? It can be easiest first or most value derived first. Uh, it's up to you. I mean, what kind of KPIs? Again, what kind of KPIs you are targeting first to move, right? So basically, easiest first gives you the confidence because you can get done with the transition faster and you
Mhm.
will see how it plays and what benefits this approach gives you versus highest value first. Maybe you'll have to put in more thought process, lots of
Mhm.
effort into migrating that piece of service which gives you most value
Right.
and hence also could impact your business. If this microservice approach fails, you'll have to roll back to Monolith again or do something else, right? So
If it
if it is
succeeds, then
actually delivering more value,
if it
ultimate
succeeds,
value,
then
you need to
you
see the
really
impact.
win
Yeah,
big. Yeah.
correct, correct. So again, it's your appetite for risk, basically, right?
Right.
Will you do easiest approach or the highest value, most value derived first kind of thing?
And what do you think is the role of specialist firms? For example, we here at xcubeLABS, we are one of those firms that specialize in work like this, right? In making
Right,
these
right,
kind of transitions happen, in doing the consulting behind it. In fact, interestingly, one of we have 6 core values as a company, and in fact, 4 of them actually are very closely related to the discussion we've had today. The core value called market impact, core value called scalability, core value called long-term thinking, and also the fourth core value called technology forward. Right.
right.
So, what do you think are the roles of specialist firms once the company decides, okay, this is the list of modules. We also know whether we are going to do big bang or a phase wise. Uh, where does a company like us come in?
There are I think, two aspects to this thing. I mean, I would want to approach this in two things, right? So the first is the experience that this firm has in doing this work. So they can bring that knowledge to you. They can present things better to you on how to approach this problem, right? They can offer various solutions to get these things done, what tech stacks to use, or what tools to use, or where to do it, how to do it, when to do it, right? That is one. Again, inclusive of whether you do it big bang or whether you do it
Got it.
phased wise, right? But the other aspect is um, the people, right? The experience is, of course, because of the people. But let's say I'm a small company of 30 individuals. I already have a monolith, and I want to migrate it to microservices in a big bang approach. Now imagine this monolith is consisting of 50 individual modules, independent modules, right? 50 modules. So 50 individual microservices. If it has to become, and this is an example again, if it
Not
has
a
to become
one-to-one mapping,
50,
but yeah, let's
yeah,
imagine it is. Yeah.
yeah, let's imagine it is a one-to-one mapping. And if you have to build 50 microservices, you are 30 people and you want to do 50, you are short of 20 people. Let's say, for example, one person per microservice. Then you're short of 20 people. These firms can get you the manpower so that you can deliver all these microservices in parallel at the same time, wherein maybe you are doing 30 and this firm is taking up 20. Or maybe your firm is managing the existing monolith as is, and you rely on this firm completely to deliver all these 50 microservices in parallel. That is the second.
Right.
That is the second thing that an external party can bring in, even if it is phase wise. You don't. I mean, in let's say if you wanted to do the Big Bang approach, you would have to hire 50 people outside, right? Your upfront cost is much higher without even knowing if it will benefit you or not. And in the other side, on the phase wise approach, this firm you can ramp up slowly. You'll only onboard one guy, do one microservice, see if it is working out, then slowly add two more, then three more, then four more, or maybe get accustomed to those technologies, learn those things, assign more of your own team to work on these microservices, and in tandem with this external party, do all this stuff together in parallel as move forward on your roadmap.
Right. Right. So let's come to the ROI before we move to the case studies. So what's your comment on? I think the question also was around ROI. One of the questions was how accurate has been the ROI estimates, and yeah, how do
Okay,
you figure out the ROI angle?
right. The ROI, again, I think we touched upon this a little earlier in a different question. So basically, you have ROI based on business KPIs versus security KPIs versus tech KPIs, right?
Mhm.
So you measure your ROI, let's say, if transitioning to microservices has helped you, um, use newest technologies like ChatGPT. What is your ROI, right? Your ROI can be much higher than the, the expense that you had to go through integrating this tech, maybe. Newest techs like AI and ML and other stuff, right? Which can deliver much more value. People are more fascinated with this tech. People see worth in this. People see more value delivered out of automation, etc., right? AI thinking on its own and delivering things for you versus you writing and thinking and other stuff, right? So one of those is that tech things. Second things, let's say in tech aspects, earlier you were using programming language X. Now programming language Y is much more better with bigger ecosystem, customer support. When I say customer support, it's not customer support, ecosystem support. Basically,
Right. Right.
the upgrades to the language, the upgrade to the framework, and all stuff. And if you can deliver the same amount of functionality in the new language or language Y much faster, then your ROI is much higher, right? So you're improving your ROI there. You're delivering things faster. Whether if it is business metrics, again it is GTM. Because of this new language Y, you're delivering your features much faster than earlier. Or you are
Innovating
integrating,
faster.
you're innovating faster, you're experimenting faster, right? You're delivering faster. That's your GTM. Then what if this microservice approach has actually helped you, reduce costs? For example, we touched upon, scaling down and scaling up earlier. So unused resources being shut down. So you're not spending unnecessary money. You're only spending up services when you need them. So your capex is gone. You're only talking about operational expenses. So you're in control. So your ROI there is on reductions of costs. In the GTM case, if you are experimenting faster and releasing faster and changing your software based on user feedback faster, then you are increasing your user loyalty, retention, things like that. That is
Right.
much bigger ROI that a company or a business looks for than immediate goals of revenue or profits, right? How viral is your business, how viral is your app, and etc. So your ROI is not just based on money. So it's very hard to pinpoint saying that I've been accurate in estimating what the ROI is. Uh, in some cases is 100x versus in some cases is only just 2x or 3x.
Okay, so we'll come to the last section of today's agenda, which is about case studies. So give us some examples, some stories from your experience, what we have done for our clients. So can we talk about some case studies, especially around microservices and the impact?
Sure, definitely. Let me think. Um, I Yeah, so let me talk about two case studies. One an Indian company and another based out of US. Okay, their development, their you know the areas in which their apps are used are also different. The US company's products are only used in US. The Indian company that I'm talking about, their services are only used in Indian market.
Okay. They are
Okay.
pretty much
So
centered in their
they're
own geographies.
completely in their own geographies, right? So there is no global connotation to this thing.
Got
But
it.
still, microservices have helped them there. How did they help them there? So in the case of the Indian company that I talked about, there the costs are unmanageable, going spiraling out, lots of UX issues, um, and performance bottlenecks, um, and they are kind of in a situation already. Okay,
Okay.
they're in a problematic situation, and there we do this exercise with them, analysis, consultation, reviewing their KPIs. Obviously, we understand the pain points from day one because they're already in the pain, right? So, I mean, clearly visible pain points, right? There could be other hidden pain points that they want to tackle later on, but usually in a consulting exercise, you'll get all of this. But the visual pain points, which is cost overruns or cost escalations, performance bottlenecks, etc., etc., they hugely benefited from the microservices migration or transition, because now they have clarity on which of these microservices is a cost center for them, which of them is causing these cost escalations or spiraling costs or whatever. Clearly, now they know. And again, if I have to draw a parallel between these two companies that I'm talking about, even though they are in different geographies, both of them are multi-million DAUs kind of thing, right?
A million
So
DAUs.
DAUs. So they're
Got it.
already at a very large scale, and
Scale,
even
yeah.
at that point, migrating to microservices isn't that hard. It's just the approach you take to get things done. And
You
this
got to be
company,
diligent. Yeah.
correct. And this company has seen or experiencing value of microservices within the first 6 months, even though it took much longer to complete the entire migration, approximately about 1 year. They started, leveraging these things and seeing the value that microservices provide within 6 months of we starting to work on those services.
Like, how do we quantify this value? Like some.
Right. For example, let's say downtime. I'm trying to access some website or some service or something that I want to do on your web app or mobile app, and it isn't functional because something is in the backend isn't scaling up for this kind of load or scaling up for this has some performance bottlenecks or whatever, right? If you clear those out, your user experience is improving manifold, right? People who are frustrated yesterday are not frustrated today.
Right.
So people who wanted to leave yesterday might stay back and see for a while, right? So your even though your retention isn't great, your customer loss is at least time is at least stopped, right? You're not losing customers anymore because of this, right? So your immediate ROI is not no user loss, basically, no user churn, right? That's one immediate ROI that you can see. Even though in the initial phases, you see that there is cost escalation. And so when I said cost escalation, there is an increase in your cost because you're slowly carving out your microservices piece by piece. The new microservices are increasing their cost because you are putting in more people to do this, or buying new
Absolutely.
infra, or deploying new clusters, etc., to run these services and all stuff.
Right.
Initially, it will look like that, but when the whole thing is migrated, the ultimate, microservices package that you have should deliver the same value as earlier at much less cost.
It basically pays for itself. The whole exercise
It
pays
pays
for
for
itself.
later on,
Many times
correct,
over.
and many times over.
And what about
And
the US company?
yeah, the US company, I think, again, multi-million users, right? Already at scale. But for them, it is not a problem that initiated this dialogue. It is, how should I put this? It is their roadmap for their future. They wanted to scale for the next million or the next billion users, and they wanted to get ready for that scale. And so that's where this exercise started, and we, you know, uh, build these components, microservice components, multiple microservice components to scale faster, scale better, uh, increase their throughput, basically overall number of transactions handled, for example. But this is not number of transactions handled, but basically, let's say number of users that you can, handle at any given point in time.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, imagine a ticketing system. If everybody is, logging into a website to buy the one ticket that is available, the golden ticket, who will get that ticket, right?
Right.
At that kind
Yeah.
of look, I mean, imagine that kind of load on the system that with very, 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 um, you know, minimal user experience loss. If I come to this platform and see there is a ticket, if I buy, if I go to the payment gateway, it should be mine. But at least the landing page where I'm looking at that there is another golden ticket available, that should be functional always, right? That can't go down because there is so many people trying to look at it, for example. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this conversation. Uh, Thanks a lot, RK, for your time and for your expertise. And
Yeah, sure.
I want to thank all
Thank you
our
for me.
audience who took out time from their schedules, showed up on the call. Thank you for your questions. There is one last question that we can attempt. It's from Sanket, who says, if I know API development, then how can I start to learn microservices? What's the best platform to learn microservices?
Um, I think I should, if I say which platform is the best one, it'll be judgmental, right?
Will be,
But
yeah,
yeah, so I think,
you can touch upon the
if
first
you ask me,
first part of the question. If
yeah,
I know API
if
development, then how can I start to learn microservices?
right. So um, by definition, what are microservices? I mean, when you do microservices, what are you supposed to think about, right? You're supposed to think about communication layers. You're supposed to think about monitoring and debugging layers. How do you connect the dots when multiple services involved, and how do you identify root causes of problems, right? Those kind of things that you have to learn. So you'll have to understand. distributed logging, distributed computing, containerization, and the deployment patterns like blue-green deployment, canary deployments, API provisioning and versioning, rollbacks of those APIs, etc., etc., etc. Many things here again, right? So ready to ready to consume resources. I think Udemy and other guys will have lots of training courses on how to do microservices and other stuff. But if you are looking for tools and tech, I think pick a cloud service, any cloud service of your choice, based on your understanding and familiarity of those, whether it is AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, because the heavy lifting of deployment and management of those things is already done at those clouds. You're only simply writing your own microservice, quickly deploying and testing it, so that you can understand the concepts. Basically, you can feel them very quickly.
Yes, you don't have to like
Right.
do a
Instead
lot.
of understanding how to do API management and rollback and rate limiting and other stuff, you'll quickly identify how to do this, then slowly understand each of these concepts one by one, because it's already available right on the cloud.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everybody who joined, and thanks once again, RK, for talking
Thank
to
you,
us
Ketan.
on
Thanks
this
for
topic.
coming
It's
here.
a complex topic, and I think you've done a great job explaining it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
that's pretty much it for today. Keep watching the future webinars from xcubeLABS. Thank you, and have a good day or good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night. Have a good day.